Imagine a physics problem that's deliberately set up wrong from the very start. They take a chassis that was born to haul lumber, haul fences, haul heavy and rough things, then drop into it a massive 8-cylinder engine, the kind meant for speed and a roar. The result, instead of loading cargo into the bed, you load smoke onto the road. Instead of thinking about pulling power to crest a hill or tow a trailer, you hear the tires clawing at the asphalt as if they're trying to erase a streak of time. And then, the most beautiful paradox appears. A pickup truck, boxy in shape with proportions that are anything but sporty, can still rip from 0 to 60 miles per peak in a way that embarrasses the sports cars of its era. Nowadays, when people mention high-performance trucks, they're quick to think of the Ram TRX or Shelby Raptor builds. Machines born in an era where technology controls everything. Electronics, traction systems, data-tuned chassis. But today's story belongs to the 60s, when people did the same thing with their hands, with a welder with bold decisions made in the factory. At that point, the question naturally appears, who was the first to dare to try it? And where did it begin? And the answer isn't found in a quiet design room, but out on the racetrack, where crazy ideas are often tested before anyone has time to write rules to stop them. In 1963 in Southern California, there was a car guy, a San Diego radio broadcaster named Dick Boone, and he chose a platform no one was thinking about, a 1963 D100 with a body that looked like a warehouse on wheels. That truck carried the nickname Dragmaster. Instead of a just-enough setup for a pickup, it was fitted with a high-performance 400 cubic inch V8 of the era, a version tied to the max wedge line with output hovering around the 420 horsepower mark. For a truck, this was no longer an upgrade, but a change of nature, turning a work tool into something that could step into territory that belonged to speed. At the Winter Nationals in Pomona in 1963, Dragmaster didn't just show up to grab attention. It went on to win the factory experimental class. Dodge's reaction at that moment. Instead of music treating it as a racer's pastime, they saw a formula they could sell. If a D100 could bring the spirit of the track to the starting line, then it was absolutely possible to create a performance package that would take that experience off the drag strip and put it into the hands of customers out on the street. And it was from this decision to pull that configuration closer to commercial production that the groundwork for the high-performance package on the 1964 D100 truly took shape, opening the door to a very strange chapter in American pickup history. And with the D100 high-performance package, this wasn't the kind of mass production you picture on an assembly line where everything flows as smoothly as a clock. This was a true logistics nightmare, because what they were trying to do didn't match the Facto's rhythm at all. The issue was that a standard D00 was built to work, not born to cradle that much power. So, first, they had to pull an ordinary D100 off the line, separating it from the flow of production. Then the frame had to be cut, had to be hand-modified, because if you were off by even a little, everything would be misaligned. The engine wouldn't sit in the right position, the drive line wouldn't run true, and the truck would become an unsolvable equation of vibration. Even the standard load-bearing crossmember no longer fit. They had to remove it, replace it with new custom-made brackets, the kind of solution you won't find in any manual because this truck itself had no precedent. Then comes the most irritating part, one that makes a lot of people feel tired just hearing about it. The routing for the dual exhaust system. It's not as simple as having two pipes and calling it done, because a pickup's underbody is designed around a different logic. The clearances and hang points aren't meant for a one-off system like this. To make it fit, they had to massage the underside, had to work it so everything could pass through, without rubbing, without running too hot near things that shouldn't get hot, and without turning the truck into a booming resonance drum. It's the kind of work an assembly line can't do in place of a human, because each truck is almost its own case. Next, they had to deal with something even more dangerous: traction. The rear of a pickup is too light, and the torque is too big. Without control, that power just turns into wheel spin. Clear's throat. That's why the rear traction bars weren't installed in a bolted-on, and call it done way, but were welded solid to the rear axle so the tires had a chance to hook when the driver got into the throttle. It sounds simple, but it says everything about the nature of the whole project. This was a truck that had to be built, not just assembled. Precisely because everything was done by hand with no automation, the price carried the character of an almost handcrafted product. This upgrade package alone cost $1,235, a figure close to 23 the value of the base truck at the time. And it explains why the D100 high-performance package was never produced in large numbers. Dodge didn't choose an engine that was just enough. They chose a machine that carried the breadth of the racetrack, but had been tamed so it could live out on the street. The version enthusiasts call the Street 426, created by softening the infamous race-bred 426 Max Wedge, a 426 Ci an 8-cylinder engine with a rated 365 horsepower at 800 RPM already sounds big for a passenger car of that era. But in a pickup, it becomes even more absurd. And then comes the number that forces people to change how they see it: 470 cell-feet of torque at just 200 RPM. The kind of low-end pulling force that makes you feel like the truck doesn't need a run-up. It just needs the command, and it shoves the whole body forward to create that character. Its setup was rebalanced towards street driving without losing its edge. A 10:3-to-1 compression ratio was very high for a pickup of that era, showing Dodge had no intention of making a safe version. They still wanted the engine to respond quickly, hit hard, and feel sharp as it comes on. The intake system used a 4-barrel carburetor paired with a dual exhaust system, letting the engine breathe freely, so every stab of the throttle wouldn't get choked off by the pickup body that was never meant to accept that much airflow and heat. Along with that, the drivetrain chosen to handle that big torque was the 727 3-speed automatic transmission, the kind Dodge was confident enough to put behind its strongest combinations at the time, so that every time you step into the throttle, the pull doesn't break halfway through. Outback was a drive axle with a 3:91 gear ratio, a short and aggressive choice like you're deliberately making the truck pounce in the first few feet, trading smooth cruising for a constant readiness to launch. But the price of that formula is a weight distribution problem. The nose is heavy because of the big engine, while the tail is light because it's a pickup by nature, and the bed is empty. So when the torque hits, the truck tends to turn power into wheel spin instead of traction. This is the kind of danger that doesn't live on paper. It lives in the moment you're tracking straight. And the truck suddenly reminds you its rear end is lighter than you thought. Especially on the shift from first to second, the pull is still too abundant enough that the rear tires can still squeal, burn rubber, or kick the tail out if you get a little greedy with the throttle. That's why when it can run from 0 to 60 km/h in under 8 seconds and cover the 4-mile in the mid-5-second range, the numbers are enough to make people stare once they remember this is a pickup truck. To make it easier to picture, that performance can be set alongside a stock Pontiac GTO of the same era as a visual yardstick for just how shocking it is. And when you compare it to the common pickups of the time like the Ford F-100 with its strongest 352 cubic inch setup, or the Chevrolet C10 with its strongest 327 cubic inch setup, the gap becomes clear. The D100 high-performance package isn't just stronger, it reacts like a vehicle born to charge forward. So much so that you feel the weight shift rearward, the steering go light, and the road itself seem to stretch tight beneath the tires, not to calmly haul a load. And what's interesting is that the D100 high-performance package doesn't need to brag through its looks. It chooses a very dangerous kind of classic aesthetic. It looks so ordinary you can easily pass it by. And only when you hear the engine, see the way it leaves the starting line. Do you realize you've misjudged it? With the Custom Sports Special package priced at $235, it appears like a subtle supporting layer. With this package, the pickup's cabin is pulled out of the job site world and brought closer to a passenger car feel. Bucket-style seats taken from the Dodge Dart, a center console taken from the Dodge Polar, carpeting and armrests that make the interior less rough, less tool-like, and more indulgent. Its purpose is crystal clear. If you already own a pickup that can run like a race car, then why sit in a cockpit that's only ever known dust and work gloves? And then there's a configuration that car lovers always mention with a tone that's half craving, half reverence. Buyers who chose both the Custom Sports Special Interior package and the High Performance package. At that point, the pickup becomes something complete in a way that was hard to believe at the time. Inside the polite feel of a passenger car, and under the hood, a heart wild enough to make you think twice about every stab of the throttle. It's almost the ultimate pickup of that era because it doesn't force you to sacrifice comfort for speed, and it doesn't make you give up speed to keep comfort. And the truth is, the D100 high-performance package is rare, to the point that only about 50 were built between 1964 and 1966. In the community's unofficial records, the number of survivors is estimated at only around 24. There's even a self-made list that notes 19 trucks, with one believed to have been destroyed, meaning that every time one appears, it isn't just a vehicle, it's an event. And even within that small group, there are variants that are rarer still. There's mention of about 12 trucks that took only the high-performance package without the luxury trim package, true ultimate imposters, along with a 1963 prototype running the 413 engine as a first footprint before everything even had time to become a name. This is the kind of rarity that people don't just price in money, but in story and in the credibility of the history that comes with it. But the greatest legacy of the D100 high-performance package isn't its rarity, but the technical formula. It's stamped into history. The biggest engine possible, dropped into the lightest chassis possible, then accepting every consequence of physics in exchange for that surge of acceleration. A pickup was no longer defined by how much it could carry, but by how hard it could launch. A way of thinking that kept repeating, evolving, and becoming an underground bloodstream in American truck culture. You can draw a straight line from that spirit to later special performance trucks like the Little Red Express, then the Dakota Shelby, and finally, the modern Ram TRX. Each generation adding more technology, more control, but the core never changing. A pickup can also be a place where power is celebrated. If you enjoyed this story about the D100 high-performance package, hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes where we'll open the hood on each legend in turn and listen as steel tells its story. If you've ever seen one, heard one, or even touched a D100 like this in real life, drop a comment below. Which state it's in, what condition it's in, and which original details it still retains. I'll read music them all and pick a few of the best stories for a dedicated episode. And for now, share this video with a friend of your generation who loves the sound of a V8. Because sometimes all it takes is one share for a legend to be told one more time. See you next time.